Friday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. NBA All-Star Game in a few weeks out in San Francisco. Last night, the Eastern Conference starters were announced.
In the backcourt, Donovan Mitchell from the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Sharing the best record in the NBA with the Oklahoma City Thunder at 36-7. Sixth All-Star selection for Donovan Mitchell in 6 straight. This is his 8th season. 23 a night, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and playing in 41 of the Cavs.
The fans definitely got those two correct.
So it's Mitchell and Brunson in the starting backcourt, and head coach Kenny Atkinson has also earned a spot to coach one of the 4 teams in the NBA All-Star Game for 2025. 4 teams, the little tournament action going on this year for the All-Star. He earns it because the Cavs clinched having the best record in the Eastern Conference as of games on February 2nd. That's the requirement. It's the first time Atkinson was named the head coach of an All-Star game. He's the first Cavs head coach to receive the honor since 2015 and 2016. That was Tyronn Lue. I mentioned he'll coach one of the 4. A Cleveland assistant will also serve as a head coach of one of the 4 other teams. So Atkinson becomes the 4th head coach in Cavs history to earn the honor of being an All-Star head coach. Lenny Wilkins did it back in 1989. Mike Brown in 2009. We mentioned Ty Lue in 2015, and Kenny Atkinson in 2025. Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. We'll be along a little bit later in the show. We'll talk plenty about the All-Star Game, the Cavs representation, as well as Cavs getting ready to face the 76ers in Philadelphia. That's where Chris Fedor will be joining us from. Well, Guardians pitchers and catchers will report to Goodyear, Arizona in 18 days for the start of spring training. First official workout February 13th. There will be a new look to the Guardians' right side of the infield as Andres Jimenez along with Josh Naylor are traded, and Naylor will be replaced by Carlos Santana. And here's a look at what they're losing in Naylor. He was a big part of the middle of the order for the Guardians the last 3 years, a middle of the order that, quite honestly, needs some more pop to it. So Naylor last year hit 31 homers, 108 RBIs. Again, the team needs some pop. In 23, he hit 308 with 97 runs batted in and had 20 homers and 79 runs batted in 2022. Naylor was in the final year of his contract, so that's the reason, one of the reasons for the trade. He'll turn 28 in June. So the Guardians did sign an old friend, familiar name, Carlos Santana. Santana will turn 39 in April, so he's 11 years older. Had 23 homers, 71 run batted in for the Royals last year. In 23, he had 23 homers, 86 runs driven in. He did struggle a couple years ago, hitting just over 200 with 60 runs batted in. Again, average a little down, and for the most part, homers and RBIs a little down from Josh Naylor. Now, the Guardians will also be giving more playing time to a young guy, and they tell you that's one of the reasons they want to do it. Kyle Manzardo had an up-and-down start to his major league career last season with the Guards. Hit .234, 5 homers, 15 runs batted in 145 at-bats. He struck out 41 times, had just 9 walks, did rip 12 doubles. Now, fairness to Manzardo, later in the year, he hit much better. He hit .270 at September and hit .316 in limited postseason play for the Guardians. He's 24 years old, and for the Guardians' offense to do what they need it to do, he will need to take advantage of the opportunity he will be given to earn regular playing time for the Guardians this season. Some news from around the NFL. Some of the coaching vacancies being filled up. This one's a little bit of a surprise. Pete Carroll and the Raiders have reached an agreement on a 3-year deal with a 4th-year team option for Carroll to be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Carroll is 73 years old. He will turn 74 shortly after the season starts in September. The strangest coaching hire in this NFL cycle goes to Jacksonville. They'll name Liam Cohen as their head coach after Cohen had walked away from it and then had agreed to stay with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL.
The deal was basically done. Not basically, it was done. The Tampa Bay Bucs just wanted to get to Liam Cohen, really talk to him about some staffing, make sure he came in and signed it, then kind of move along. They could not reach him. They could not find him. They could not get him on the phone. An awkward 24 hours went by. And at that time, it became clear like something is going on. The Jaguars, meanwhile, their situation changed dramatically. Trent Baalke, the general manager, without a great reputation in the NFL, despite stocking a really, really good team talent-wise in Jacksonville, he was fired. Liam Cohen, I would say at that point, was like, you know what, maybe I still sort of have interest in Jacksonville. We'll see. Yesterday afternoon, owner Shad Khan reached out, continued conversation, sent the plane, which is a great move if you're an owner. Always send the plane. Sent the plane to Liam Cohen. Yesterday afternoon, flew to Jacksonville, got in their building, made his pitch and received the pitch for him to be the next coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Then last night at about 1:10 a.m., not about, exactly 1:10 a.m., the deal was done. Liam Cohen informed Tampa that he was out, expected to be the new coach of the Jaguars, Peter, announced this morning.
So the plane got him. That's always a good thing. Some news relative to the NFL draft. Quinshon Judkins is headed to the NFL draft. He had some eligibility remaining at Ohio State, but he will forego that eligibility and enter the NFL draft. He is the 5th overall running back, according to Mel Kiper's positional rankings in the upcoming draft, even before things get going on the combine. Again, Judkins, great season with the Buckeyes, just the one season, but was part with Trayvon Henderson of that really good running game. Browns are obviously looking at quarterbacks in the NFL draft. Name that keeps coming up is Jalen Milroe, in part because Milroe played a season for Tommy Rees, the guy that was named offensive coordinator of the Browns yesterday. So Bill Belichick, along with Mike Lombardi, breaking down some of the things they see that Milroe needs to improve on.
Very good level of talent, but you can see these are kind of the things that he's going to have to work on. Now, this was early in the year against Texas, and, there's some, he had a few plays in that game. I'm sure he'd like to have back, but, just thrown right into double coverage here for an interception. But I'll say in fairness, he got better, and there was less of this later in the season.
Yeah, he wanted to go to Burton, who's now playing for the Bengals, number 3 inside there. Sometimes when you practice a play so much, you throw it to the guy you practice, and it's not necessarily going to be the same way in the game.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes those plays look good in practice.
They don't look good in the game.
They don't follow the reads in the game. But very good on the deep ball. I mean, this guy's got a big arm. He can get it out there and get it out there and put it on the money. Very explosive player with his legs, with his arm. Could really create some big plays. And play action here. He gets good protection, stands in the pocket, and can see this.
Right.
I think what he needs to work on is the overall anticipation, seeing those tight windows on third down in the red area, those type of things rather than, the first down, some of those play action routes come wide open for him. Thought this was, a throw here where he just doesn't read the corner, which when you run the inside receiver on a flag route here, you've got to see that corner, and he just doesn't do it here.
If he looks at the deep throw and throws it short, that's the play. But unfortunately, he tries to put it in there.
Again, Mike Lombardi and Bill Belichick kind of breaking down what they saw when they looked at Jalen Milroe. Very interesting. We'll talk more about Milroe as well as the NFL draft. Quick timeout, then it's Brad Ward from the Orange and Brown Report as well as the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Sports4CLE, be right back. Stay with us.
Are you ready? The Ohio Lottery is about to unleash 50 new millionaires on Ohio. Want a chance to become one? Play VIP Millions. With 50 $1 million winning tickets, it's your best chance to win $1 million ever.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Why don't we just draft talent? If you want to get a draft pick and somebody wants to move up to 2, don't drop down past 3 or 4 so you get one of these high talent guys. Hopefully the pass rusher from Penn State so he can help Myles Garrett. Maybe we could at least build our defense up and play better because the offense ain't going to be any good.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Brad Ward from the Orange and Brown Report, All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. I aside from saying that I'm not agreeing with the offense isn't going to be any good, I understand the questions. If you don't like any of the quarterbacks really high, don't take them.
Yeah, you can't force it, right? It's the second pick in the draft. Just okay or just good is not good enough for the second pick in the draft, right? So you can't settle or just roll the dice on a guy just because he plays quarterback. You really have to love him at 2. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with the caller. It's same with you, except for saying that I know that the offense is going to be terrible. I won't concede that yet, but I think it's too early to proclaim that. But if you are going to not take a quarterback and you do take Abdul Carter, then you're certainly taking the other team's quarterback or making their job a lot more difficult, which is kind of an equalizer. So putting Myles Garrett and him together, I do think Carter is a special player. And worth that pick if you have to stay there. I do agree with the caller that you shouldn't drop down any further. I think he said 3 or 4. I wouldn't go any further than 6. I think there's about 6 guys worthy of, an elite talent in this. There's kind of a drop off after 5 or 6, depending on who you would listen to. So I wouldn't go down any further than that if you are going to trade down. So, without conceding that the offense is going to be terrible, I do kind of agree with the caller, and I wouldn't force the quarterback here just because as close as I can get, and I know I said this to you before, is a maybe if Cam Ward is there, and we're still early in the process here.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. And along those lines, Daniel Jeremiah, it's NFL Network's draft analyst, talking about what he has seen with Shedeur Sanders from the Rich Eisen show.
Some teams are going to really, really like him, and some teams, aren't. It's
Why?
not going to
Why
be
is
a
that?
slam
Just
dunk.
why?
Because he doesn't have the exceptional size. He doesn't have an exceptional arm. He's not an exceptional athlete. He's really, really solid. His superpower is and obviously important, accuracy, touch, anticipation. Like the throwing stuff is great. Somebody brought up a great thought on him the other day when I was talking to him around the league. He said, it sounds weird to say it because of his dad, but he said Shedeur is an overachiever. Like he the sum is greater than the individual parts. If you just break him down with all those, the traits, the size, the arm strength, the explosive athleticism, the twitch, all that stuff, you might not be enamored, but he knows how to play the position. And so I go back to going back to Adam Peters we were talking about earlier when I was saying, did you learn a lesson when you were in San Francisco with Brock Purdy and the scouting process? And he said, yeah, he was the best at quarterbacking. So like, that's kind of a funny way to phrase it. But I was like, okay, yeah, drop back, see, sort, and deliver the ball where it needs to go accurately. That's what Shedeur does really well. It's just, I think, as through the spring process, some people that are going to be more traits-based in their analysis aren't going to be as high on him.
Well, and that's a fair assessment. The other thing I would say, there is a level of athleticism that is needed to play quarterback at the NFL level, at a acceptable level if you're looking to be a playoff team.
Yeah, absolutely. And a concern there that he kind of gets to but doesn't say is like, I think he can be good. He processes the field pretty well for where he's at, but nothing's overwhelming, like you mentioned, as far as the athleticism and stuff. And it doesn't have to be if you're an elite processor and an elite, anticipation with your throws and understanding the field. I don't know that he's there yet. And he's had you got to think of this in bringing back to who his dad is. He's had to have had the best of the best trainers and coaches his entire life, Dave. So how much higher is his ceiling, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the athletic traits aren't there to make him a premium athlete, and he's already achieved what he's achieved, and he's had the best of the best coaching all along, how much higher can he go? How much better can he be at the next level? I have to ask that question. I'm not saying he can't be. I think he can be a good quarterback, but once again, is it okay to take a good quarterback at 2? How far does that get you?
Yeah, and you're comparing him to a guy who was Mr. Irrelevant. Brock Purdy was literally the last pick in the draft. So,
yes,
when you look at the skill sets, it doesn't match. This is kind of interesting relative to Jalen Milroe. So 17 turnovers, 11 interceptions, 6 fumbles lost, horrid pocket presence, 23 sacks, questionable effort at times. I don't know about the effort.
Yeah.
The thing, and you and I had talked about it, I don't know that Milroe has played enough football to, he chose not to go back, and everybody you talk to, Combine, he's going to go crazy and perform well because he's a really elite athlete. But it's the accuracy and the things that they're saying Shedeur Sanders does well, Milroe needs to get a lot better at.
Yeah, you're talking like polar opposites here, right? Like elite arm strength, elite athleticism, and ability to run, and but he has everything that you would want: size, strength, athleticism, arm talent is out of this world. But he just played his first year of high-level quarterbacking in 2023, right? And under Tommy Rees there. So, I would push back hard against the effort, I think he said there, because I think where he's actually going to win over some teams, Dave, from what I've heard, is the kind of person that he is. Like, we're talking somebody with like a extreme work ethic here, that will and a leader and a really good young man. So I think he's going to win in interviews pretty well. So somebody may fall in love with him there and take him. I think somebody will take him in the first round, in the back half of the first round for sure.
All right, so this is from PFF. One free agent each team can't afford to lose in the AFC North. For the Browns, they say Devin Bush. Based on what we know or don't know relative to Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I kind of want Bush back, and I want to see more of Diabate. And the linebacking room is a huge question mark that can get answered if Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah can return and is the JOK that we saw this year before he got hurt.
Yeah, I agree with you. I never would have thought of Bush off the top of my head as a pivotal guy to have back. But when you account for JOK's situation and the question marks around him, it does make sense. You need to have somebody that performed well at that position, knows the scheme with Schwartz. And having him back, it would be key. I think they'll get him back. I think he liked playing here. And so I don't think that would be a difficult thing to accomplish for them this offseason.
All right, before I let you go, early breakout candidates for all 32 teams. Again, this is from PFF.com. Browns, they say Jerome Ford. Nick Chubb suffering another severe injury, not under contract next season. Browns may very well hand RB1 keys to Ford. 80.3 PFF rush grade, an average of 3.5 yards after contact per attempt, 8th best among running backs, 50 or more carries. Brett, I think I'm in the minority. I don't know that he's a guy that I want to see more carries. There are the upside. He has a lot of the explosiveness that you want, but there are too many 0 and yard loss and 1 yard gains for a guy that I'm going to give the ball to 20 times a game.
Yeah, the running back room with the Browns needs to be remade, sort of, right? And this is the class to draft 2 guys even with 11 picks. There is a ton of talent in this draft, a ton of explosive talent. And if you're gonna model a room around anything, you got to look around the league and look like the Lions and what Atlanta has done, and with the way defenses are playing cover 2 and trying to make you work the ball down the field, that it's re-emphasized the running back position. So I think that you need to give attention to that room in the draft. I would not concede the starting role to Ford. He can certainly be a part of the formula if he shows up and performs, because he is a home run hitter. You know, he will break the big play. But I think they can do better and get younger and more explosive there in this draft. So I think that would be a goal of this offseason.
Yeah, I would agree with you. That run game has to be what it was a couple years ago, not what it was last year.
Has to be.
Brad Ward, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Brad.
You're the best, Dave. Thank you for having me.
Brad Ward, make sure you check him out. You can read him, the Orange and Brown Report. He is also the co-host of the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Straight ahead, we continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Let's welcome in Jake Burns from BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. And Jake, I'm curious. We know Tommy Rees, now the offensive coordinator next season for the Browns. Just your analysis. You know, when you sit down and look at that, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you listened to some of the introduction press conference yesterday, and I think you can see the draw to Tommy as he's a young guy, 32, 33 years old, but very mature. So, you know, at least in the exposure you have to him, you know, talking through his thought process and where he's at with with taking the job in Cleveland and how he thinks about offensive football. You can see the mesh point. I especially like his philosophical angle of, strategic advantage comes through deception and making your run look like pass and vice versa. That creates a bit of ambiguity for the defense. So, I mean, listen, I think there's a mesh here between things that Tommy's done in his career. I think he's a guy who can lean into bigger personnel, multiple tight ends. He's certainly, because, if you look back at his Notre Dame career, calling plays there, it was really the Michael Mayer show. Didn't have much of wide receiver talent that made a difference on those Notre Dame teams. It kind of, he had been after Chase Claypool and some of the guys who'd gone through there. So I think he's comfortable living in a world where tight ends are a featured focal part of the passing game. He certainly is diverse in run game approach, and I think he'll mesh well with Mike Bloomgren in terms of what they like to game plan and how he thinks through things with Kevin. And he's also not afraid to get in a world where he has a running quarterback. He worked with Jalen Milroe, and I think they did some exciting things with him, putting him into space, letting him use his athleticism. He can dial in some RPOs. I think the thing that I like about Tommy more than anything as far as a fit with Kevin is Kevin's going to drive the bus. It's going to be largely what he likes to do, and obviously paired to what Bloomgren likes to do in the run game and protection game. But Tommy has a broad level of experience to different types of quarterbacks, different types of offense, and what can work to, use motion and manipulation to create some advantages. So I expect him to be a guy, obviously not calling plays as we know it right now. Kevin Stefanski kind of cleared that up yesterday. But if he's somebody who is working with the collective, the totality of the offense, they're interviewing quarterback coaches, so he's not really tied to the quarterback room so much. He's just looking at ways at which this group can collectively make their run and pass work as a more cohesive, big picture offense, and then obviously tie in more modern wrinkles that make them an effective group. Because I think that where they got off track last year is they had no ability to attack 3 levels of the field, whether it's through running, passing, or different diverse approaches to things. They failed to make that multifaceted offensive approach that got after defenses in ways that make it hard horizontally and vertically to defend them. And I think that's where he's going to try to step in through formation suggestions, through motion suggestions, and tying in ways to get athletes into space and get them into one-on-one matchups that help them create some big plays. So I think it's an interesting tie-in, especially, like I said, if they get a quarterback coach in a way that they haven't done this in a while, which is have a committed offensive coordinator, not dialed into just the quarterback room, but having a chance to work hand in hand with Kevin and develop things that make it a more proficient Sunday offense.
So I know this is from your mailbag on the BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Have we seen the ceiling of Kevin Stefanski's offense? I'm curious as to your thoughts on that.
I mean, I would say no. I think there have been good versions in the past. I think the second half of 2020, most of 21's run game was good. I think Baker dealt with too many injuries to make an effective pass game as a collective. But I do think they were really strong with Jacoby Brissett in that first portion of 22 before Deshaun Watson's return. Let me phrase it this way. I think that there's ways in which that offense, the core principles and how they identify the run game, pass game, deception stuff, it hasn't reached the ceiling because I don't think they've effectively added in the layers that make it an effective, high-end operating offense. I think they've been one of the worst motion usage teams across the board. I don't think they've gotten their wide receivers as active in the run game in terms of blocking, inserting into the B gap, C gap, getting them effectively operating as tight ends at times, and also, making the tight ends a more featured part of the passing game too when they get into those heavier personnel groups, not just David, but other tight ends as well. So I think that they have a baseline that can be pretty effective. At least they've shown that in years past. But if you can get some modernization in terms of formation variations that keep defenses on their toes, and then you obviously can tie in more, I think, effective motion usage. And if you can get the run game back on track, I do think that there's a level that this could get better. Because if you look at what Miami has done, you look at what the Rams and the 49ers have done, they've been consistently strong offenses in this space that we're talking about right here. And again, it's because they understand how to take advantage of numbers, which I think Bloomgren will help with. What I mean by taking advantage of numbers is, your run concepts that give you number advantages to certain sides of the field, or looks that you can be able to break tendency and get yourself into good spots. And then I just think they haven't been able to, in 5 years, be able to effectively dial in how to use motion as an advantage to what an offense can do. So I think that's a big part where Tommy Rees hopefully is a big addition for them as a leading voice, not just a supplementary voice, where he talked about he really only focused on tight ends last year. So hopefully he can get into more of a leading voice and be a difference maker there.
So same place this question comes from. And again, I love the question. How do you balance scheme fit and talent when you're looking at quarterbacks for this system?
Yeah, that's a great question. You obviously want to have guys who at the college level live in a place where they're operating concepts or principles in terms of the concepts that NFL teams like to run and like to thrive in, right? You don't want a guy who runs too many RPOs or runs too many the popular spread concepts. It's not even called spread. It's more like a veer and shoot is the name of this stuff. Tennessee runs it, the super wide splits. And a real college. It's college gimmicky in my opinion. Tennessee, Ole Miss, some of those teams are doing it where it's just a very wide split, take advantage of speed and space because the hash marks are so wide in college compared to the NFL. So I think what you want to do is try to find a balance of a player who obviously has to have the physical traits, got to be able to turn the football loose when he needs to. If he can move his feet and extend with his legs to get to better places to throw or run or pick up first downs, I think that's a spot where you're definitely looking at talent and traits, and obviously the ability to identify and decipher and pick apart coverage. And like Tommy Rees said, the quarterback position is a problem solver. So can you do those things? And, you want a guy who's comfortable doing those things, but that doesn't mean you're limited to that, right? Obviously I think Pat Shurmur is the OC with Shedeur Sanders is a guy who's definitely rooted in a lot of what the NFL has done traditionally for the past 2 decades. But I don't necessarily think that what Cam Ward did in Miami means he cannot do the things that Kevin Stefanski also wants to do. And I think that, there's a little bit of legwork you have to do to go through and talk through with your staff and with the staff at both Miami and maybe Washington State, where Cam was before that, about was he able to do these things, but you guys didn't choose to do them? How do you think he translates? So that's the work. Anybody can turn on tape and watch what they've done, but you're trying to project and see where the fit is. And I think you can get into this narrow scope of just because a guy did it in college means he automatically can translate and do that in the NFL versus a guy not doing something in college, and that means that he can't do it in the NFL. That's what makes some of this stuff the tricky guesswork that it can be at times. So I definitely think you don't mind a guy living in an offense that has NFL skills, NFL I think core principles, but I think with the way the world of football is expanding in terms of college stuff pushing itself into the NFL and the NFL stuff working in backtrack that's on, it's finding its way into many high schools on Friday nights as well. You don't really worry about that as much as you used to per se, unless it is, again, a total gimmicky 5 wide constant type of offense where it's like, that's just not the world we're going to be living in the NFL. And I do think that Cam has done enough of that stuff that you can start to project that in a way. And the Browns will have to delineate whether he can, but there's enough there to project that, in my opinion.
All right, you bring up Shedeur Sanders, and I know you've addressed this on BrownsFilmBreak.com. There's a dilemma with Shedeur Sanders. You've heard Dion say multiple times there are teams he will not let Shedeur play for. We don't know if, in fact, the Browns are one of them. They may be. What do the Browns do if Dion says Shedeur's not going there?
It's a great question. I mean, in theory, you'd like to say he's going to get drafted here. He's going to have to come here and play. And while that's possibly true, I do think you run into a world of like, agents not preferring to work with you, or it could be any number of nasty ramifications of something like that. I mean, we've seen it before. We saw the Chargers obviously make the deal for Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers, but on the other end of that deal was Phillip Rivers, so you didn't necessarily hate taking that back and getting an additional first the next year if you liked Phillip Rivers enough. This is a unique situation. We really haven't seen it replicate all too often. Like I said, Phillip Rivers was one of them. Probably John Elway, also one of them way back in the early 80s. There's not a ton of this. I don't know. I mean, I think that there should be a chance for them to sit down and iron out details of this. If this is a place they want to be, if this is a move they want to make, I think we probably take this a little bit more serious in early March when the combine has happened. And I know the Browns coaching staff is going to be dialed into the Shrine Bowl where Fedor is going to be in next weekend with down in Dallas. So I don't know yet. I think that on the surface with the player empowerment stuff we've seen, I don't know that it'd be a good decision. But then you have to weigh, what compensation comes in return. If he wants to go to New York and that's the pick behind you, what are you getting out of that as the Browns to make sure that happens? I'm not sure. And is it also, hey, Shedeur only wants to go to New York, or are they open to the Raiders coming up at 8, and then that creates a bunch of competition for you're not just moving with one team because he only wants to go to New York or whatever. That's where the Browns can get into more of a bidding war and maybe live in a more comfortable place with feeling inclined to make that sort of trade. So I think it's a really tricky dilemma, but I think also acting like on the surface draft him and he's got to show up here and play is a dangerous place for if a guy holds out or it gets really weird and then you've wasted a pick that you needed a player to come in and be really good for you, and you could have maybe had somebody else, maybe Abdul Carter from Penn State or something like that. So this is the low surface bubbling plot line that I think is interesting, and not just for Fedor, it's also Travis Hunter, who is a guy that Dion views as a son of his as well, that could also get weird if he just is anti-Cleveland on everything. We'll see. The Tennessee situation is a little different because it's historic for your son or Travis to go number 1, and that's like a thing that you would just kind of tolerate to be number 1 pick in the draft, whereas the second pick you can start to maybe strong arm somebody. I don't know. I'm not predicting anything here, but I think there have been some sort of rumblings that maybe he doesn't want his son as a quarterback here to end up in Cleveland, and that would be a bummer. If the Browns loved him as a player prospect and trying to draft him, that would be a big bummer.
Jake Burns, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Remember, you can catch him, BrownsFilmBreakdown.com, and tell us what people can do there.
Yeah, no, we have a great community, growing community of film-devoted fans who love to talk through the game, the details of the game, and understand why the Browns do the things they do both on and off the field. So that's what we offer. We do daily podcasts and film breakdowns and deep dives on coaches, decisions, and free agents and draft stuff, and it's a good time. So, yeah, join us, like you said, BrownsFilmBreakdown.com.
As always, great stuff. Appreciate it, Jake. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.
Jake Burns, BrownsFilmBreakdown.com. Make sure you check him out. So we're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Film breakdown, video analysis of some of the quarterbacks in this draft that Browns fans are interested. Lance Reisland, straight ahead. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We look ahead to the draft. They like to say the draft begins in Mobile at the Senior Bowl. That's just a couple of days away. For us, it begins right here on Sports4CLE. We welcome in Lance Reisland from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Our first positional breakdown, video breakdown, film analysis. We're going to start with the quarterbacks because everybody wants to know. And Lance, we're going to look at 5 of them. The top 2, which are consensus, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, and then a lot of guys that some Browns fans have been asking about, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard. Let's start with Shedeur Sanders. Take us through what you see, and there's a strength and things that they need to work on. So when you see Sanders, what have you seen?
Well, first of all, you're going to see right here, you're going to see the linebacker drop. This is simple high-low. You're going to see at the NFL level. He squats on the under route. Then you're going to see the dig. That's a classic high-low from Pat Shurmur. So you get a lot of NFL-type concepts, high-lows, smash, under routes, things like that, things that you're going to see at the NFL level. Now, this is an issue that he has. Is you're going to see great protection. He starts to drift. And as me and my dad used to call them, they're drifters, right? So instead of buying time in the pocket, they buy time by drifting. Now, a lot of times that happens because you're so used to getting hit. And he has been absolutely killed in the last 2 years with that Colorado offensive line. Now, a couple of things that, I tell everybody about Shedeur Sanders. One is you have to disconnect from his father. I understand that as, if he doesn't let him play here, all that. But in terms of his skill breakdown and his film, the first thing you see is how tough Shedeur Sanders is. He never, ever loses his fundamentals when he's getting hit. Next thing you're going to notice is that his ability to move within the pocket and within structure is exactly what Kevin Stefanski likes. He's very good at side-to-side movement. He's very good at using his feet when necessary, but he's looking to throw the football, go through his progressions, all the things that Kevin Stefanski and Tommy Rees love.
Yeah, and to your point with going through your progressions, moving in the pocket, Lance, that's usually the sign of a guy that's going to have some success at the NFL. If you were going to look for an important skill, that would be it.
Well, and he's got a lot of things. One of the things he anticipates very well. He's got tremendous accuracy. He completed over 70% of his passes in college. Again, being under tremendous duress. And the thing you like about him when you watch him on film is you're going to see him scramble, reset his feet, throw the ball, and take a big hit. And then he gets right back up. So the stuff he does off the field, things like that, you never hear about his work ethic. He seems like he's an extremely hard worker. I base my evaluations on what I see on film. Shedeur Sanders can make all the throws. He's very cognitively pre-snap smart. I think he's really, really tough. He's got the size to last in the NFL. I think he's a really good pick. If the Browns take him at 2, we'll see. But I think he's the best fit of the 2 top guys.
All right, the second guy that you're talking about as well is Cam Ward. And again, 6'2", 223, so decent size. What do you see when you look at him? Again, we're going to have a strength and something that he needs to work on. So take us through that.
Well, the strength is you're going to see his ability to throw off routes. So you're going to see him off his back foot, throw this crossing route. Now, at college, he can get away with that, but he can make all the throws from the different angles. You're going to see a sidearm, little RPO sidearm throw with no legs involved. Things you have to do in the NFL. Now, this is what he does. He relies on his arms too much. You're going to see, he's got to stay right there in the pocket. He does not need to leave the pocket. By leaving the pocket and then throwing across his body, he throws an interception. And what you get from Cam Ward is what I saw a lot on film from Deshaun Watson in 2020 when I watched the Texas film. He's extremely good off script. He's extremely good when he has to improvise. I think Cam Ward actually has a higher ceiling than Fedor Sanders with some of his ability to make throws on the run. However, that does not work very well with Kevin Stefanski. So in terms of, I think they're 1A and 1B, but now you guys start thinking about scheme fit. Fedor Sanders fits the scheme, his ability to throw from within inside the pocket and use his feet. Cam Ward can do all these things as well, but Cam Ward likes to improvise and make things happen. And he does that very, very well, but he also has a tendency to turn the ball over at times, things that have killed the Browns. But when you watch the film, there's some throws that just completely awe you with Cam Ward. But I'll stick with Fedor Sanders just because of his consistency, his accuracy, and his ability to throw on structure from the pocket.
All right, we're going to take a look at a couple of guys that won't be in those first two in all likelihood. The first one we're going to look at, Jackson Dart from Mississippi, 6'2", 225. What do you see when you look at Jackson Dart?
Kind of a wild card, right? So you're going to see this great. You're going to see right here, he throws a great. He's going to get just a levels concept. And what do you like about Jackson Dart? His ability to throw that chunk play from 15 to 25 yards. This is what he does poorly, right? This is just step to the side and throw the ball to the check down. So you get the good here with the really good fundamentals, driving the ball off his back foot to that second level chunk, which you get a lot in the NFL. And then on what he does poorly, sometimes he doesn't see everything. So if he just steps to his side there, resets his feet and throws, that would be my one fault against him, is his ability to continue to look downfield sometimes when under pressure. Jackson Dart also plays for Lane Kiffin. He kind of gives you that wild man vibe, right? His hair, the way he acts, the way he runs. He's fearless. He can make all the throws. For me, this is the guy who could be an all-pro or a bust. I don't think he'll just be average. He'll either be not very good or he's going to be just outstanding. He's just one of those guys. He makes a lot of plays. He's a football player. Like I said, he plays for Lane Kiffin, and he kind of has that Lane Kiffin attitude where he's just going to kind of be a gunslinger and go after it.
The other thing about him, a lot of similarities to Bo Nix last year in that he has played a lot of college football as well. He started a lot of games, and there's something to that. I don't know how much, but there is something to that.
Well, I'm a big Bill Parcells fan, and as you watch these young guys come out, one of the things you get is how many games have they played in college, and I think that's huge. And I never really did. You know, some other positions you have to take size, speed, all that into account. The quarterback position has that it factor, and whatever that is, the Jaden Daniels, Patrick Mahomes, these guys who have the it factor, that's because of the plays they make when the plays are presented to them. And, you know, a lot of times that happens with just reps you get in college. So these guys who have tons and tons of reps, and I got some guys who are on my board as well who played a ton of college football. I think it's important that you see as much as you can before you get to the NFL.
All right, so the next one that we're going to take a look at is a guy that is tied to Tommy Rees, new offensive coordinator for the Browns, because he played for him at Alabama, Jalen Milroe. What have you seen with Milroe?
Well, for me, he's very much like Jaden Daniels, obviously not as refined in the pocket as Jaden Daniels. One thing he doesn't get enough credit for is his ability to process information and throw from the pocket. This is what he does poorly. You're going to see him throw off his back foot, not drive the ball, and kind of throw an interception. He didn't play very well in the bowl game. Now, with Jaden Milroe, obviously he's got great feet. He does process very well, but he loses his fundamentals with inside the pocket. As where Jaden Daniels, I think, could play in the pocket all game, I don't think Jaden Milroe can. And I still think there's a place for him in the NFL in the right scheme. That scheme is not the Browns, in my opinion. However, he does a lot of things well. He's not all legs. You know, you kind of go back to my comp on him, once again, obviously I'm talking coming out of college, not for what they've done in pros, is like Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. The ability to use their feet, people forget how good they are in the pocket and the decision-making they can make. Jaden Milroe makes a lot of good decisions. He's just got to put some fundamental mechanics and some processing stuff to go through. His feet are so good that when he gets in trouble, he uses them. In the NFL, he'll have to get to that second, third progression a little bit more. Things I think he can do.
And keep in mind, both Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson were kind of work in progresses in their first year because they didn't throw the ball with a lot of accuracy. Boy, did they change that, and they got that right pretty quickly. All right, last one that we're going to talk about relative to the quarterbacks, a guy that we continually get a lot of voicemails about on the show. Will Howard from Ohio State. Big kid, 6'4", 225 pounds.
You're going to see the first one is that this is just, you're going to throw a fade route here. Got man coverage with Jeremiah. This is against Tennessee in round one. Just throws a great ball. So he throws a really good deep ball, and he throws a really good short ball. Now, this is a poor decision, but sometimes you get great players, you make great plays. You're going to see the corner squat. He should work to the tight end right there. Instead, he throws it up to Jeremiah Smith, which you get away with in college when you have a guy like Jeremiah Smith. He will not get away with that in the NFL. Now, if you ask me, I was asked today what I thought of Will Howard. Here's what I have not seen enough of Will Howard make the chunk plays yet. I will go back and I will watch a lot of his Kansas State film. He's a tremendous competitor. He can use his feet very well. He can make all the throws. I worry about him being able to drive the football into tight windows at the NFL hash to hash. The other thing I worry about is that it's hard to evaluate his Ohio State film because literally all 5 of his skill guys are going to be day 1, early day 2 picks. And that sometimes kind of makes your evaluation a little bit biased. Like this play, for example, if you break this down, this is a great throw. This is a poor decision. And sometimes poor decisions work out when you have great players. Everybody's great in the NFL. So I don't know. I think he made himself a lot of money in the playoffs. Just still need to see him drive the ball in that 15 to 25-yard range because at Ohio State, it was a lot of deep balls and a lot of quick screens. Yeah. I do think he can do it, but I do think he's a work in progress.
Yeah, and to your point, he did it against the elite competition throughout the college football playoffs. So there is something about that. But again, I went from late day 3, maybe an undrafted free agent. I think he moved up a couple of rounds simply because he played against elite competition and played pretty well.
Well, yeah, and they beat 8 of the 10 teams this year. Ohio State really earned it, right? So they lost Oregon. They got all that. They lost Ohio State, which is a rival game. And any of us who have ever been part of a rivalry game, high school, college, or pro, those go either way sometimes. So, but he did. He played really, really well against great competition. He makes good decisions at times. It's hard. I've been in a situation. If you have Jeremiah Smith, you get him ball. It'll be interesting. He's going to be a guy who will jump up the boards if he throws the ball well at the combine, at pro day, things like that. If he throws those dig routes and those deep curls and those intermittent chunk routes well, he will skyrocket up a lot of people's boards.
Lance Roslin, as always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Lance.
As always, thanks for having me.
Lance Roslin, make sure you check him out. Film breakdown, video analysis of the quarterbacks in the draft. He will do positional analysis throughout the process leading up to the combine and the draft. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Full Court Action is a half hour devoted exclusively to men's and women's basketball from across the Mid-American Conference. Hello, everybody. I'm Dave Bacon. Join me at 6:30 Tuesday nights, and we'll meet the coaches and players from the Mid-American Conference who are making an impact in basketball. Full Court Action will spotlight the top plays and performances from all across the Mid-American Conference with some historical action as well. Catch Full Court Action Tuesday nights at 6:30 on Rock Entertainment Sports Network. We turn our attention to the Cavaliers. A little bit earlier in the show, we told you Donovan Mitchell earns the start in the All-Star game. Kenny Atkinson will be the head coach as well. Let's welcome in Chris Fedor from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, Cavs beat reporter. Chris, I know you wrote an article, and take us through this. Why Darius Garland got your vote alongside of Donovan Mitchell to be a starter in the All-Star game?
Yeah, Dave, it wasn't easy. To me, the second guard spot in the Eastern Conference was the toughest one on the entire ballot. When you talk about the guards, the front courts, the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference, it was that second guard spot in the East because I felt like I started with about 8 different names of guys that I thought were worthy of consideration to be an all-star starter. But when you have the conversation of all-star starter, like that's a select group of guys. You're not just picking all-stars. You're picking the guys that are going to start the game. And I felt like it was a select group, and I came down to Darius Garland and Jalen Brunson. And look, everybody looks at it a different kind of way. Everybody has different stats that they think are important, that measure value, that measure impact. And I don't know that there's any right way to do it. And I don't know that there's one stat that stood out to me above the others. There are some where Jalen Brunson is better than Darius, where he has been considered a more impactful player. Then there are other stats where Darius Garland has the edge. So I felt like those two guys, Jalen Brunson and Darius Garland, were very, very close. And I didn't know what I was going to use as a quintessential tiebreaker. But I think part of what I used is the Cavs record. They've got the best record in the Eastern Conference. They're tied for the best record in the NBA. And I feel like at some point you have to reward winning. And it's not to say that the Knicks are the Charlotte Hornets or Washington Wizards, but the Cavs are a step above the Knicks. And Darius is a big reason for it. And the other thing that stood out to me, Dave, is just the Cavs and how they play when Darius is on the floor versus how they play when he's off the floor. That to me shows his value. That to me shows his impact. And when he's on the floor, they play with a historic level of offense. When he's off the floor, they're basically the Utah Jazz. And so this isn't just a situation where the Cavs are 36-7 because Donovan Mitchell is clearly the best player on the team. Like, I think there's become a real debate on who's the best, most impactful player for the Cavs because Darius has been that good, because Darius has been that consistent. So when you combine it all together, plus the fact that the Cavs have the best record in the Eastern Conference, and he is really threatening to be 50, 40, 90 in terms of his shooting splits, I just felt like Darius got the edge slightly over Jalen Brunson. But if you went with Jalen Brunson from New York, I'd have no issue with that because only 3 guys in the NBA have scored more total points than him. And that's Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Anthony Edwards. But I thought there was enough statistical advantage for Darius that I could back up that case for him.
And Brunson was the other starter, just as a point of reference. We'll get more to an article you wrote on Garland in a minute. When you look at the All-Star game, how many players can the Cavs legitimately get? That core 4 probably all deserves to be All-Stars. They've all played at some level that you could make a case they're among the elite in the conference.
Yep. That's how this goes, though. Unfortunately, there are only 12 spots in the Eastern Conference and 12 spots in the Western Conference. So every single year, Dave, you know this, you have 2 guys, 3 guys, 4 guys who are all-star worthy that just don't fit. There just aren't enough spots for them. So I think Jarrett Allen's going to end up being all-star adjacent. I think Darius gets in. I think Evan Mobley gets in. And I think Jarrett's probably like one of the first cuts. And the other thing that you have to consider here when it comes to Jarrett Allen and his case is, you know, the way that the reserves work, it's 3 in the front court, 2 guards, and then 2 wild card spots, regardless of position. Because there's so much depth of talent among the guards in the East, I think both wild card spots are going to be guards. I really do. I think it's going to be 4 guards and 3 front court players. So then you start saying, okay, Evan Mobley is going to be one of the front court guys. Jaylen Brown is going to be the other front court guy. So now you've got 1 spot. Are you giving it to Jarrett Allen over Franz Wagner? Are you giving it to Jarrett Allen over Bam Adebayo? Are you giving it to Jarrett Allen over Pascal Siakam? And it just kind of becomes a numbers game. And I just don't know, as much as Jarrett is impactful for the Cavs at both ends of the floor, and his impact on winning cannot be argued for this team, I just don't know that he's got the production that matches some of the other contenders in the front court in the Eastern Conference. And I also don't know if you can fully justify having 4 members of a 12-person group being all from the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a year that you can justify it, it's this year, because they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. But are you really going to make this year's all-star team in the East? Are you really going to have it be that level of represented by the Cavs, where 33% of the players are Cavs? I just don't think so. Not this year. Not when you talk about some of the other guys standing in Jarrett's way. I think it's going to be a hard call. I think he's going to be one of the last cut, though.
All right. You wrote an article about Darius Garland and kind of how the doubt has fueled what he is doing this year, his revenge season, if you will. Take us through that.
Well, Darius, he was not happy with the way things went last year for him and the way things went last year for the Cavs. So we can start there, Dave. I had to sit down with him at training camp. We went into last year and everything that happened last year. And it wasn't just like his level of play that didn't reach his standard. It was the fractured jaw that he was dealing with. It was the death of his grandmother. It was just not being happy throughout the course of the year because of everything that he was dealing with on and off the floor. And you could sense that from Darius. He just wasn't the player that he had been in years past. And, he made a point this offseason to recapture that joy, to try and do a little bit of soul searching, to look himself in the mirror and ask himself, okay, what do I want out of this season? What do I want out of this partnership with Donovan Mitchell? What do I want in terms of how people are going to view me around the NBA? And the conversation last year, given the way that he played, it was, should the Cavs trade Darius Garland? Should they break up Darius and Donovan? Is Darius overrated? Is Darius overpaid? Is he too soft? All of those conversations were happening both locally and nationally, and Darius heard them all. And I think the way that the Cavs looked at it and the way that Darius looked at it was like, hey, look, there were logical explanations for me having this bad year. Whether you want to call them excuses or not, there were logical explanations for my play. And it wasn't up to standard. And I'd be the first one to tell you that it wasn't up to standard. And Darius came in with a different mentality. He came in with a different focus. He came in with a different approach. He came in with a different maturity, a different drive. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that this fan base and other people nationally turned on him and said that he couldn't be this player, that he couldn't be an all-star caliber player again. And now he has elevated himself back into the conversation, not just as one of the best guards in the Eastern Conference, but one of the best players and one of the most impactful players across the NBA. And a big reason for that is the mentality that he has taken, and the maturity that he has shown and the joy that he has recaptured. You can see it. These celebrations that he's doing with his teammates, the celebrations that he's doing by himself. It's just a different version of Darius Garland this year.
So you're in Philadelphia. Cavs will play the 76ers tonight. Come back home. They play the Rockets in a back-to-back. Team that they lost to by a point. Tough ending to that game in Houston. What are you paying attention to in these two games that are back-to-back?
Yeah, I think we've gotten to a point, Dave, and this may sound elitist, but I think we've gotten to a point where the Cavs have proven like all they need to prove during the regular season. They are clearly a legitimate title contender. This offense is clearly different than it was last year. It is one of the best offenses that we have seen in the NBA in the last 2 decades. That's how consistent they've been at that end of the floor. That's how potent they've been at that end of the floor. So I don't know that there are too many things that I need to really learn about this Cavs team, or they need to show me to validate this start that they've had. At some point you just have to look at it and say, this isn't a fluke. This isn't a mirage. This is who they are. They are legitimately better so far than the Boston Celtics and every other team in the Eastern Conference. Like, the only team that has played with the level of consistency that the Cavs have played with to this point is Oklahoma City. And they're also a legitimate championship contender. So, I think when it comes to this team, you probably have to get really, really nitpicky. And, if there's a common thread among their losses, and there aren't many of them, there are only 7 of them. But if there's a common thread among those losses, it's just the style of team that they continue to lose against. It's the style of player that team has compared to the Cavs. And as the trade deadline gets closer and closer, this front office really has to examine, do we need another big wing? Do we need somebody with length, size, athleticism on the perimeter, somebody that's a little bit better and more consistent than Isaac Okoro, somebody that has more size than Max Strus? somebody that gives you a little bit more on a nightly basis than Dean Wade does. That's something that this team, this front office, needs to explore. And I don't know what that answer is going to be, but that is the common thread among the teams that the Cavs have lost against, that all of those teams have long, athletic, quick wings on the perimeter that have given the Cavs problems. And problem is a relative term in this conversation. Again, I think at this point we're nitpicking because you asked the question, but I don't think that there is anything that I have seen from this team through the first half of the season that would prevent them from competing for a championship this year. And there's nothing else that they could show or do that would change my mind unless there is a significant injury down the stretch that changes the landscape of the NBA.
Yeah, the other thing I would say is, as you go through that, Kobe Altman, Kenny Atkinson certainly should have earned a level of trust from the fan base. Kobe Altman for standing pat, and Kenny Atkinson for coming in with a plan. All indications, you judge by the results, it was pretty well thought out.
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a reason why they decided to double down on the talent that they had. Because it did exist. It was just trying to find a way to maximize that talent and get the most out of that talent. And the thing that Kobe Altman in the front office continued to say all off season without actually coming out and saying it, but their actions spoke volumes. They said that coaching was the problem. The primary problem why the Cavs, came up short last year, why they lost in the second round to the Boston Celtics is one, because Boston's really, really good, and they were really, really good last year. But the other thing was they had a coaching problem. They believed that they needed to bring somebody in that was going to put more modern philosophies into the offense, that was going to be a little bit more diverse in terms of the attack offensively and defensively, a guy that was going to have a level of trust and belief from the guys in the locker room that didn't exist to the same level last year. And I think, the Cavs owed it to themselves to see what it looked like first before making drastic changes with the roster. Okay, what does it look like with Darius and Donovan together in this offense, in this system, with this coach? What does it look like with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together with this level of spacing, with this style offense, all those different things? And we've gotten the answer. The core four was good enough. The core four works together well enough for them to be a championship team with the right guy pulling those strings.
Chris Fedor, Cavs beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Appreciate it, Chris.
You got it, guys. Anytime.
Chris Fedor, make sure you check him out, plaindealercleveland.com. Joined us from Philadelphia, where he will cover the 76ers Cavs game tonight. It's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We will see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you Monday at 4 on Sports for CLE.